watching the most unique automotive channel on YouTube, the Hoosier Garage.
Alright, so you can probably tell a lot of this has been put back together. We got all the wires back in place. I haven't got the timing or anything. I need to do some vacuum hoses. One thing I'm trying to decide on what I want to do is whether to keep some of the old charcoal system, which is basically your emissions type junk for your gas tank. You know, the fuel comes back up and recirculates it, that sort of thing. And this piece here being so short ran into a little canister here, and there was some other lines involved here, and here's the canister itself, and some vent lines which no longer are able to run across this front corner of the engine over there. So I might just eliminate it and run the feedback line back just directly into the charcoal canister and run this traditionally. This is one of the first years you had things like this, which by the end of the 70s into the early 80s, you would open the hood of a vehicle or look at one of these vans and there was just hoses and hoses and hoses everywhere. So might simplify that. One thing I do need to do is hook up this electrical choke, which is no big deal. There's a ground positive there, so no big deal on that. One thing, and let me get you off the tripod here and I'll show you. I talked about plugs, and I had all these extra openings here and here, and then there's actually two over there. That's just for other systems that you may have pertaining to maybe a later model, other sending units that can fit in there, stuff like that. Well, I was able to transfer the plug or the nipple here from the old cast iron intake. We covered that in the last video and put it on here. So that's good news there. And you can either order the ones from Edelbrock, which they don't give you in the intake, unfortunately, which are the little Allen head recessed plugs, and you know, get maybe 5 or 6 of them for about 15 bucks. Or you can go down to the big box store or your hardware store, somewhere like that local, and I put some never sees on them on the threads, screwed them in until they got kind of snug, and then left it there. Another little improvement, I guess you could say, we made was the throttle spring return bracket. It had one that used just this bolt down here, okay? It was just a little finger that came up. So I looked in my stash and I had this bracket, which is a 2-bolt bracket here. And you can see there's one of the bolts there and the other one there, and it just comes up. This worked better in this situation. I think that one came off of like a 74, so maybe the newer models have that style bracket on it. As far as our linkage, some cases when you have these old engines, if you have a 2-barrel, you need the linkage or an aftermarket system to go to a 4-barrel. Now this is the original bracket right here. This is the original kickdown rod. This is the original accelerator rod. We can see it comes from up there, and the pivot and everything. There have been a couple of modifications to this though, and one of them is, like we showed you earlier, that rod, and we'll get to that in a moment. But this rod right here was a little straighter than this. This was factory, all this from here, and this was actually factory, but it wasn't bent that much. So what I did, I added to the bend. I gave it a little bit more exaggeration there, and right here between these two marks I gave it a little bit of a kink and kind of perked it up a little bit here in the middle. And the reason I had to do that was when you would put this bell crank or pivot at that point there, it was really low and it was actually interfering with this throttle peg right here, okay? So I did some modifications to where it wasn't dragging across it, it wasn't directly in its way to where they wouldn't work together or they would possibly bind. So I had to bend it a little bit here and exaggerate that bend a little bit more. And this is adjustable here, and you can tell where the cap end of it was further up over where it's kind of rusted. So you can regain your length back by just bringing it back out a little bit, and then it just simply clicks right on here. So if you take this, it just snaps right off, okay? It's just a little stud, and you can actually turn this And then there's that little kind of a ball joint situation there. You fit it back on there and you just click it on. Okay, so that's good to go. One thing you'll probably need to do, at least that's what I have here, I happen to have one from years and years, like almost 20 years ago, was one of these Edelbrock Chrysler adapters, and it screws into the existing part of the carburetor here and down there at the bottom, and it juts it out a little bit, and it allows you to put your throttle arm and all that stuff on it, the peg. So we did get that one. They still make that one. You still get it through Summit or Jags or whoever you need to get it from, if not directly from Edelbrock. And then you take the peg off from the old 2-barrel carburetor, this nut, and then the peg itself, which has the little grooves in it. See that there? So you put it on this hole, and if you have the instructions, whether it be for the carburetor itself or with the adapter, it'll show you exactly where to mount everything up, be it to the carburetor or be it the peg, so you can readapt everything. We'll have to readjust this. This is your kick down. Usually the back part of that sits against there and it pushes it back when you accelerate. But one thing that's really missing here is, see this hole right here? There's a arm that extends from there and goes up to what should be right here on this peg, and there's a little hole on it for you to put a cotter pin on. Well, if you took the 2-barrel one, it was about 2 inches too short if you had it in this configuration. So more than likely the 2-barrel carburetors set back a little bit and it accommodated that. So that won't work here, and you could do, I'm certain, a few different ways to make that work. You can either use the existing one and add to it, maybe with a coupler or by welding it. I decided to just take a piece of rod, and we're going to bend it to look like what the original one did, but just make it longer, and then put our hole in there so that we can attach it on here. And I'm considering this about neutral, where this pivot right here, the bell crank, is as even up here as it is down here, so it's not kicked back like that or kicked back this way, because the pedal will be affected. So we'll kind of leave it to where it's about there and get our measurement off of it, which I just did that, and then you leave enough room to put a bend in it so it'll fit through the hole. And a little bit of work, and I know I'm getting really long-winded here, but this is kind of essential. A lot of people have this problem. And the only last major modification that was made, if you look at this bracket, originally it stands straight up and down, okay? Since the 4-barrel carburetor is wider than the 2-barrel, which is much narrower, there's a lot of binding or a lot of sideways action that these arms and levers are going to be taking. So I took some vice grips, clamped them here, and then bent it back towards the driver's side door just a little at a time until you got a nice even pitch there, so that they're not all crooked and running sideways. So also your kickdown rod floats inside this little canal like it should. It brings it over. It's just a one-piece rod, and that helps you there. So hopefully when we get the rod fabricated and drilled and clipped in here, the acceleration on it will be normal. We'll be able to have our full length of pedal, which seems to be a problem when some people hook these up. They don't get enough pedal, and it feels like they have more engine under them, but they can't access it because the pedal only goes so far. So we want to try to adjust all this correctly, and we should be ready to go. Okay, so if you start with a round piece of rod like this, and you want it to look factory, which I apologize, I lost my factory piece. They're laying around here somewhere. But you want the other end to be kind of flat. And I did not heat this up. You can heat it up, much like a blacksmith. And you have two flat sides here. I might go a little bit further on this. Here's our line. We're just going to use this line as the end spot on it. And I would wear some gloves, both hands. Lay it here on your anvil, flat as you can. This is just a 2.5 pound sledge, I think. So lay it on there. flip it over, do the same exact thing. So we have a nice double flat edge. Like I said, you can go a little further, you can add some heat. I might try to mash this end down a little bit, kind of flares upward or outward as you get to the edge. About like that. And it gives you a nice flat spot to drill a hole. You'll want to be able to drill it just enough for it to pivot on the throttle pin. So our bracket now has a hole in it. I drilled it. The pieces that the little pins that you took out if you was installing your intake when you had an original factory one on there, they're about the same diameter and size as the throttle pin. Okay, so you can use one of those if you have it laying around still. This is a little bit bigger than this bit, but I use this as my pilot bit, and I moved up a drill size and was able to drill the hole out. So we're ready to fit on here, and you can see it fits right on. So the pin already has a hole in it. We could put a new keeper or a cotter pin in it, preferably with a washer on it with this bracket on, or the rod on there, and it should move pretty good. Okay, so fast forward a few days from what you just saw. We're going to continue working on our piece. Now you can see I have the edge here on the throttle pin side. It's flattened out and I have a hole drilled in it. The hole, adequate size, it fits on there. It's not tight, it doesn't bind or anything. It's nice and actually loose, but it's not so loose it just bobbles around on there. So I want to work on this end now, and this is probably going to be a little bit more difficult. I want to take the thickness of this down a couple steps, and that will be all the way around. Okay. Okay, so with a few checks, I've narrowed that down a little bit. It's a rough go, considering the angles you're working at. But we've got it kind of in the ballpark. It's not quite fitting, it's close. Entrance point of it right here is almost ready to go in. At this point, it's kind of fine tuning. I think I'm just gonna take a file and just kind of work it around, that kind of action. But over here, it's a little more tedious. You're just working it down by hand, and I would just try to get it nice and round. It's not even close to that yet. Reduce the size of it a little bit, and then periodically check with that belt crank the hole. It should slide in there and work around freely. If it sticks in and kind of goes like this, then something's wrong. The hole on there is very round, so it shouldn't do anything like that once it goes in, but you know how things go sometimes. So I happen to remember that I had an old van cable throttle linkage situation back there from an old swap I had. It was an old 360, came out of a motorhome. Well, the bracket is the same, and this one happened to have a cruise control, and it had the old throttle cable style clamp on it, okay? But this part here is the same as what we've got in here. So instead of me jumping up and checking it every few seconds, I pulled this out of the back, and so far we fit, okay? Here we go, went all the way through it. And get it out of there, clean it off. I'll have to buzz this little bit of excess off, but see, it goes right down the middle. I can't complain about that. This is the hole it needs to fit into. Fits in there really nice. There's no grabbing, no binding. Here is our rod that we built, and we just slip it off here. It might look a little different than it did earlier. I actually compacted it where it was closer to a 90-degree angle both ways, so it was very, very rigid looking, or very sharp bend there. Well, I was just playing with it to see what it was actually kind of looking for here as far as the carburetor. And one thing I kind of had to do, let me hook this back in there, was I brought the adjustment here, this threaded rod, all the way down as far as it could, because when you push down on this, it pulls, okay? And when you pull here on this bell crank, it pulls back this way and pushes this one, in theory, backwards, and that's where your rod comes in. Well, I shortened the rod in order to get more pull, to get it to pull further back this way. But you have kind of a limited area here. When you want all this to go further back, what it would do is you would actually have to start further back there like that, and that would just give you really high idle. So my thinking here is, in order to keep using this, drop this. If I extend this arm further down, make it longer, well, when it's setting back here, it's going to actually make it deeper. It's going to have like on the outside of a circle, is going to have a longer radius, okay? So it will be able to pull it back further, okay? So with that in mind, hopefully I haven't lost you. So I would basically make this out of kind of a thicker sheet metal here, and it only has one point really to mount it without getting up into here. We can mount it on this hole with a screw and a nut and a lock washer, but it needs to be strong enough to where it doesn't bend, you know, that would be detrimental. So we're going to make it to where it kind of wraps around this piece here. So if I flip it around, it's pretty much the same either way. Here's your extra length here where the pencil mark is, okay? And we're going to make it wider, and then we're going to fold this side up and this side up to where it wraps around this snugly. When you put the bolt in here, it will allow it to be rigid around this. It'll be nice and tight. But you also get your extra length, and we'll put a hole down here. I might actually just go ahead and make this a little bit longer so we have some room to play with. In case we do happen to need that extra, then I don't have to make it a whole nother one. I could start here and make maybe a couple holes that are adjustable. So if you're with me on that, I appreciate it. Some of you out there might be going, oh, he just needs to do this totally, he's doing it totally wrong. I might be. Usually in the past, I've not dealt with vans, I've dealt with 4-barrel carburetor swaps, and I've had to get the 3-piece linkage for a 4-barrel and stuff like that. Well, this is a little bit different, and you could probably do that with a little bit of extra fabrication, but we're already doing fabrication. We're trying to do as little as possible. But let's just see if we can get by with this, and it might save somebody out there a lot of trouble with me just trying to figure it out this way. So we cut that piece out and put a little notch in it, all right? And this black mark is basically the silhouette of that, okay? Now the little notch is to allow it to go a little bit further up in there without getting, you know, caught up by the inside of this, okay? So what we want to do is use these black marks as a reference. We'll put it in our vise, and we'll put it snugly against those black marks about there, okay? And then we will bend towards me. We'll flip it over, do the same thing there, bend it towards me again. Okay, now a piece this small, it's hard to just grab it and bend it. I mean, you can if you got good enough palms that you don't want to hurt or anything. And I can move it over a little bit like that. But a lot of you guys may not feel comfortable doing that. I can go either way on it, but you also want to get a nice sharp bend around there, so you get your ball peen, work down the length of it. Hit it right at the seam. Get a nice 90-degree bend on it, okay? It'll be harder to do it the other way since you've already got that and you don't want to flatten it back out. But you've got this so far, and it should fit up in there about like this, okay? And we'll bring it down. We don't want it up in that hole there, but we want to bring it down. And if we happen to need it up that high, then we could always just trim this out up here. No big deal. But we're trying to get it where we have a little extra length here to play with, okay? So let's see, I'm gonna actually have to bring that up so I can get the length out. When I made my mark, I didn't pay attention to it, but that's what we need here. Well, this is absolutely what we need, is this bend all the way down through there. But for the next one to work right, it needs to be proper. So I'm gonna bring it there and remark it. And that'll be a little bit more accurate. So, put it right on the black line. I want the black line to just barely disappear down in behind the plane of this, okay? So here we go, we're gonna tighten it real good. You don't want to slip out of there. That's especially true, the thicker, bigger the piece it is, it's gonna want to slide out of there as you're working it. So this one we can do much the same thing. Move your strikes evenly. Now, as you get this closer to this edge here, be careful because you don't, like I said, you don't want to flatten it out or anything. I can go about right there. And then, let's see, some cases, if you bring it back here to the anvil, you can kind of work it back to your 90-degree. And you can always just reference it there. It has a little bit of a curve in it, but that's okay. A lot of it's just the actual piece. Once you get enough of a leg on it, you can bring it down, hit that, and then work the side back down. Now we want to see how it fits our piece, get the orientation right, which is like that. And it slides up in there like this, okay? Now once you get to this point, there's a little bit of slop in it. You can let it favor one side, put it on the anvil. And it's almost a snug fit now, okay? So that's what you want, and that way when this moves, it's nice and rigid. It's almost like one full piece that is solid, okay? I actually would like to bring this just for looks. Bring that down a little bit like that. Okay. And it's a nice sturdy piece. I cannot bend it that way for sure. And I'm not gonna be able to bend it that way, obviously. It basically just puts a strengthening rib in it and we're ready to rock. So we have to drill a couple holes. We want one so we can anchor it to this hole and then get it on there right. Then the rest of the piece will work as an extra mount or an extra, fastener because it's going to be working together. We'll start a pilot hole. Try to put it in the very center there. You could always punch it as well. That kind of gets it started. So there's that first hole. And I'm not going to worry about the one that the new rod will attach to yet. I just want to get this, worry about getting it to where you can fasten it to here, and then we can kind of mock it up together that way and see what we think. So this bit fits pretty good through there. It kind of catches, but it also slides through. That's about the size you want. And as long as whatever screw you use will fit through there, you'll be in good shape. Make sure you're careful. You're wearing a glove of some sort, especially a thick glove. And when you use a bigger drill bit, it's gonna want to catch more than likely, so it doesn't turn into a helicopter. So be safe, dudes. Go slow. I'm just gonna flip it over since it's about ready to bust through. Like that. And we're roughly in the ballpark of that. Okay. I'll get that little deburr out of there. We'll get a nice little nut, lock washer nut situation, and see if we can mock it together, fit it up, and see where we can go from there.
And now, a classic Indiana car commercial.
You'll be the leader of the pack in a Pontiac. Pontiac from the Pontiac pack.
The pack is back to heat up your street with Pontiac's front-wheel drive Hot Ones. Sunbird, sticker price to bring you in from the cold. Grand Am, this one sizzles with excitement. Pontiac 6000 gets you where you're going, tells them you've arrived. Get Pontiac's front-wheel drive pulling for you at your Central Indiana Pontiac dealers.
The Pontiac pack.
Now, we have the bracket extension on there. I went ahead and painted it blue. That's what you're seeing right here. Okay. Little brass screw, lock washer, and a nut holding it on. I need to get another pin for the actual throttle arm that we built. I've got the one up here. We've got pretty good action. I think it might need some tweaking, but we really need to take it on our test road back behind our house and on the street itself that we're on, and just see what kind of responses we have from it. I'm sure everything needs a little bit different tune. We'll probably have to adjust the timing some from where it was at compared to what kind of induction we've got now. Okay, but this is on there. We seem to have some pretty decent action when you push on the pedal. It has a pretty good swath to it, so we just need to do some trial and error, and ultimately if this doesn't work, we can't get any fabrication going that'll work, then we'll have to come up with a plan B. But it might give somebody some ideas, and let's see if we can get it going here. It's had some fuel. I hit the key a couple times earlier, so we got fuel back in the filter here, and so better than it was with the 2-barrel before we took it off. It's actually idling. We still got our squeal. We'll let it idle for a few minutes. So far so good. I got our advance line on there, just a temporary one. I don't have the right size, so that's why it's so long. I didn't want to cut it down for no reason. A little bit of oil dripping on the pipe down there. That's why you can see smoke. Okay, so this is actually the next night. I didn't get around finishing this video, but just gonna go over a couple of things. One, I need to relocate the little condenser for our radio suppressor, whatever you want to call that, but I'll probably just put it maybe under the carburetor stud here. The linkage. Now again, this is 2-barrel linkage. Reminder, we bent this over. We was able to kind of adjust this. We had to put a bend here, make that bend a little bit more exaggerated, and then we made obviously this rod here, okay, and that's all fitted onto the Chrysler adapter for these Edelbrock carburetors. Okay, a couple things I need to do. I need to put a washer on here where this little, see a little ridge, and a clip to keep this from walking around. Now, since this is 2-barrel linkage for the kickdown and the carburetor, the kickdown is adjusted quite a bit out that way. It's got the little screw thing as well. You can slip this off, adjust it with the screw, but it doesn't have as much range on it to go out. So I went ahead, and this is common, you'll see this done a lot, I just have a little nut and a bolt on here so that your line pressure is picked up when you accelerate. So you hit there and it starts to go back, and that'll give you your kickdown gear and all that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. So this could be permanent, it could be temporary. It just depends on what we got going, how well it works, if we need to get into something else. Other than that, we just need to get into the test and tune of it. And I started it up this morning after setting all night, and it did pretty good. Now it's set here all day, and so if I give it a little bit of that, you smell fuel. A little bit more. Starts out a little rough sometimes. But then it smooths out pretty good. So we may not have a whole lot to tune necessarily. It seems to run pretty good. And yeah, I do need to put some actual T-caps on there and get the actually part of my problem was, I think I mentioned this earlier in the video, but we gotta actually have the right size advance hose. This is the right size here. This is what they gave me. I don't know, I took a piece of this in, I thought it would be the same, but that's why you always want to double check. Actually, I have to plug that back in. It probably would have actually ran a little bit better. But this is what I've got, and I would love to test and tune it, but I proceeded to finish the rest of the body work on this passenger side. Get off, get off. We did the 2K primer and then sanded it down 320. It's all in another video if you want the details. And then I went over it with epoxy primer as the seal coat. So what I need to do next, well, we do have some other areas to fix. As I stand on my mountain of plastic, I'll describe to you these corners and the doors, which are laying over here. They need a little bit of rust repair. I kind of sat on them for a while just to see how thin they were, and they're pretty thin at the very, very bottom. So we're gonna make some new pieces, get those fixed, get them on, block them down, get our primer and our epoxy and 2K, and have it ready to match the rest of the van so that we're ready for paint. I can't wait to have it this color red solidly. We've been working on this thing for going on 2 years now, let's just say that. and it's just very exciting to finally have it just about there. And with the carburetor upgrade, I mean, what's next? I mean, that's going to be breathing through a single pipe, so we might as well get some headers on there and get some side pipes on there. But we'll try to do that maybe over the winter. And yeah, so hey, I guess that's it for this time on the Hoosier Garage. I appreciate y'all coming along and watching and commiserating with me. But hey, until next time, thanks for coming to the Hoosier Garage. See you next time.